Sirens screamed through lower Manhattan as federal agents surged into the glass tower on 3rd Avenue. Elevators jammed, phones ringing unanswered. Assistants frozen behind reception desks while a single office door stayed closed at the end of the corridor. Inside that room, a man worth billions only hours earlier sat motionless, staring at computer screens that held numbers no one else in the building could see. What those numbers truly represented would not become public until later. Before we go any further, tell me where you are watching from in the world, and if you love scam-related stories like this one. Subscribe to ScamSphere right now so you do not miss what comes next, because this collapse was only the beginning. Bernard Lawrence Madoff had spent 4 decades designing the most elegant illusion Wall Street had ever seen. Born in Queens in 1938, he built his brokerage firm from a modest penny stock operation into Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities, a powerhouse that traded billions in legitimate securities every year. He served as chairman of NASDAQ, moved comfortably among regulators, senators, hedge fund titans, and charity boards. Country clubs welcomed him. Synagogues praised him. Philanthropic foundations entrusted him with endowments meant to last generations. When Madoff spoke, bankers leaned forward. What none of them understood was that hidden behind the market-making business sat a locked-off investment advisory floor, accessible only to a handful of loyal employees. There were no Bloomberg terminals there, no complex derivatives desks, no frantic traders yelling into headsets. Instead, there were decades-old computers, dot matrix printers spitting out trade confirmations, and a tiny crew quietly fabricating histories that never existed. Madoff promised steady returns, not spectacular, not flashy, but improbably consistent. 10%, 12%, year after year. Whether the markets soared or crashed, his clients always seemed insulated. He claimed to use a split-strike conversion strategy involving blue-chip stocks and options hedges. To outsiders, it sounded sophisticated enough to discourage questions. To insiders, it sounded like genius. In reality, there were no trades. When new investors deposited money, that cash went directly into a single Chase Manhattan bank account. Withdrawals for older investors came from the same pool. No securities were purchased. No options contracts were written. It was a classic Ponzi scheme, except its scale was monstrous. By the time it collapsed in 2008, investigators would estimate over $65 billion in fictitious account statements, making it the largest financial fraud in recorded history. For years, whistleblowers tried to sound alarms. Financial analyst Harry Markopoulou submitted detailed reports to the SEC beginning in 1999, explaining mathematically that Madoff's returns were impossible. His calculations showed that the volume of options Madoff claimed to trade exceeded the entire market on many days. Regulators failed to act. Some did not understand his models. Others trusted Madoff's reputation. One examiner reportedly abandoned an inquiry after being dazzled by the firm's professionalism. Meanwhile, the money poured in. European banks, Florida retirees, Hollywood producers, Holocaust survivor foundations, Ivy League endowments. Entire feeder funds existed for the sole purpose of funneling capital into Madoff's operation, skimming fees while never verifying what happened to the assets. Clients waited months or even years for permission to invest, convinced exclusivity was proof of safety. Then came 2008. As global markets convulsed during the financial crisis, investors demanded redemptions in unprecedented volume, more than $7 billion in a matter of weeks. Madoff did not have it. The Chase account, once flush with deposits, had been drained for years to pay earlier clients and fund an extravagant lifestyle of Manhattan penthouses. $7 million Australian dollars mansion in Palm Beach, yachts named Bull and Bear, and private jets. On December 10th, Madoff summoned his 2 sons, both senior employees in the legitimate trading division, and confessed that the 2's investment advisory arm was one big lie. The next morning, they contacted federal authorities. By evening, FBI agents were knocking at the door. When Madoff was arrested, he did not resist. He told agents the fraud began in the early 1990s, possibly earlier, during a market downturn when he could not produce returns he had promised. Rather than admit losses, he chose fabrication. One fake month became two. Two became decades. As investigators raided his offices, they discovered a chilling simplicity: 3 ancient computers, a printer, and a handful of employees generating paper trails for thousands of clients. There were no clearing accounts, no counterparties, no trades recorded at the depository trust company. The backbone of global finance had never touched his supposed portfolio. Victims watched retirement savings evaporate overnight. Some lost homes, others lost decades of work. Several would later die by suicide. Charities closed their doors. Universities froze programs. The emotional wreckage rivaled the financial devastation. In March 2009, Madoff pleaded guilty to 11 federal felony counts, including securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and perjury. He admitted to operating the scheme for decades. A judge sentenced him to the statutory maximum, 150 years in federal prison, ordering restitution exceeding $170 billion, a symbolic figure representing fictitious profits. Trustee Irving Picard was appointed to recover funds. Through lawsuits and clawbacks from feeder funds and beneficiaries, more than $14 billion would eventually be returned to victims, an unprecedented recovery effort that continues to ripple through courts worldwide. Yet the most haunting question remains unanswered. How did one man fool the global financial system for so long? The world outside watched in disbelief as regulators scrambled to piece together a decade-spanning network of lies. But inside the offices that had once been Madoff's nerve center, silence reigned. Employees who had helped craft fictitious account statements now faced subpoenas, media glare, and existential dread. Every paper shredder, every ledger, every carefully forged confirmation became evidence against them. The human machinery that had sustained the illusion began to unravel. Madoff's sons, Mark and Andrew, had cooperated immediately with authorities. The revelation that their father had confessed the advisory operation was fictitious stunned them, yet it also forced them into a moral and legal labyrinth. Both had invested personal fortunes and spent years helping run a legitimate trading division that now had to be disentangled from the fraud. Lawyers and investigators questioned how complicit they had been and how much they had known. In private testimony, they admitted to suspicions, but insisted they had not fully grasped the scale of deception. The size of the scheme became more staggering as details emerged. Bernard Madoff had promised consistently high returns through a split-strike conversion strategy that mathematically could not exist at the scale he claimed. Victim statements showed 20 years of consistent above market returns up to 15% annually in some accounts during the dot-com bust, 9/11 market fallout, and the 2008 financial crisis. Analysts calculated that maintaining such a profile would have required impossible trading volumes and access to information no single firm could legally obtain. Feeder funds, many based in Europe and the Caribbean, funneled billions into Madoff's operation. Some operated on ignorance. Others had turned blind eyes to obvious discrepancies. Fairfield Greenwich Group alone had directed more than $7 billion into Madoff's advisory business, taking substantial fees while their clients remained blissfully unaware. These funds became targets of lawsuits, clawbacks, and regulatory scrutiny. Each lawsuit revealed how the world's wealthy and powerful had relied on Madoff's name as a seal of trust, assuming that high reputation equaled safety. Perhaps most shocking were the victims' stories. Many had invested for decades, relying on Madoff to fund retirements, charitable work, or educational endowments. Some Holocaust survivors had entrusted life savings, hoping to see the fruit of their suffering used for good. Entire families were wiped out overnight. One client reportedly told investigators he had never questioned Madoff because he was too polite to doubt a man of that stature. The legal consequences were unprecedented. In addition to Madoff's 150-year sentence, dozens of employees and associates faced charges ranging from fraud to obstruction of justice. Some pleaded guilty, cooperating to reduce sentences. Others fought in court, claiming ignorance or minimal involvement. The case became a cautionary tale for financial institutions, regulators, and individual investors alike. Federal prosecutors and financial analysts spent years reconstructing the fraud. They relied on forensic accounting, emails, and reconciliations to trace the flow of billions. The operation revealed the vulnerability of the financial system to trust-based exploitation. Despite audits, regulatory oversight, and internal controls, Madoff's credibility allowed him to bypass every safeguard. His public persona, calm, authoritative, philanthropic, created a veil that no red flag could penetrate. The media narrative was relentless. Headlines declared him the most trusted man in finance. One day, and America's biggest fraudster the next. Documentaries, books, and feature articles dissected every aspect of his life, exposing the mundane reality behind the myth. Madoff's morning routine, his predictable lunch orders, even his choice of suits and ties were scrutinized, revealing how carefully he had curated his image. Every detail was calculated to reinforce trust. Yet behind the headlines, there remained a psychological element that fascinated experts. How could victims, educated and sophisticated, remain blind to anomalies for so long? Behavioral economists pointed to cognitive bias, herd mentality, and authority bias. People trusted Madoff because everyone else did. Each additional layer of confirmation bank letters, statements, third-party endorsements cemented the illusion. Fear of appearing foolish kept clients silent. For regulators, the Madoff scandal prompted systemic reforms. The SEC, heavily criticized for failing to act despite repeated warnings, overhauled its internal processes. Whistleblower protections were strengthened, compliance protocols tightened, and risk assessment models modernized. International coordination increased to track the movement of funds across borders. Yet the fundamental lesson remained. Even a system built on rules can be manipulated by the perception of trust. Investigators also discovered Madoff's personal life mirrored his professional, one controlled, polished, and carefully insulated. He maintained multiple homes, luxury yachts, and exclusive memberships. Despite wealth, he lived largely in predictable routines, interacting with the financial elite in measured doses that reinforced credibility. Few outsiders suspected that behind this polished exterior lay decades of lies, fabricated account statements, and the deliberate destruction of lives. The psychological toll on victims was immense. Many endured depression, anxiety, and a pervasive sense of betrayal. Survivors spoke of sleepless nights, destroyed marriages, and irrevocable financial damage. Some channeled their anger into lawsuits, others into awareness campaigns to prevent similar schemes. One university professor, having lost nearly $20 million, wrote extensively on financial literacy, warning students about over-reliance on authority figures and too good to be true returns. Recovery of lost funds became a legal odyssey. Trustee Irving Picard initiated clawback suits against wealthy beneficiaries who had withdrawn more than they had invested, including prominent charities and hedge funds. Courts grappled with complex questions. Should innocent beneficiaries of fraudulent profits be required to return funds? How could restitution balance fairness with practical recovery? By 2020, over $14 billion had been reclaimed and redistributed to victims, a remarkable achievement, but only a fraction of the total losses. Despite decades of lies, Madoff himself never fully explained why he started the scheme. During trial, he stated he began it during a market downturn in the early 1990s to cover client losses. However, behavioral psychologists and criminal profilers suggested deeper motivations: greed, ego, and the intoxicating power of control. He had created a perfect world where he dictated truth, reality, and wealth for thousands until the illusion collapsed. Madoff's death in prison in April 2021 closed a chapter, but not the fascination. Books, documentaries, and podcasts continue to explore the story, each adding nuance and detail. Historians and financial experts examine his impact on regulation, wealth management, and human behavior. University courses use Madoff's fraud as a case study in ethics, psychology, and accounting. The story endures because it is a cautionary tale that transcends time. A single man, one brilliant lie, and a world that trusted without verification. What remains most chilling is the scale of human credulity. Billions vanished not because of complex financial engineering, but because people wanted to believe in safety, consistency, and the authority of reputation. The lesson extends beyond Wall Street. Wherever trust is unchallenged, scams can flourish, sometimes for decades. As the lights dim on Madoff's life, the story invites reflection. How often do we, in our own lives, accept what seems credible without scrutiny? How often do we defer judgment because questioning feels rude or inconvenient? The Madoff case is not just about a man, a bank, or a city. It is a mirror for society itself, a reminder that vigilance, skepticism, and critical thinking are the best defenses against deception. And while this chapter of deception has ended, ScamSphere will continue exploring the underworld of financial fraud. If you thought this scam was thrilling, wait until you hear about the next one.